Hello and welcome to the Covert Nerd Podcast. Today's a little different. We sit down with comic artist Lee Bokma and discuss what influenced his art and where he gets some of his inspiration from. So let's dive right in and nerd it up. Welcome to the podcast. Like I said, I got a chance to sit down with artist Lee Bokma and talk to him about what influenced some of his artwork that he does. And we were discussing, and one of the big things he mentioned was Conan. And so we expounded on that a little bit and came up with the Barbarian Invasion. And so we'll dive into 3 different barbarians that have influenced his artwork over the years. I want to give you a heads up. The sound on this isn't quite as good. I had to work with it a little bit and make it work so that it was listenable. So I wanted to let you know that up front. That's why it took a little longer to get this out than I had planned. Also, go to covertnerd.net. Look for links to Lee's art and other ways that you can contact him and let him know what you think. So let's get started and learn a little bit about Lee. He was a little nervous about the episode, but I'll tell you up front, he did a fantastic job, and I think we're going to have him on again. So if you have some feedback about this episode, send me an email. Go to covertnerd.net for all the other ways you can contact me via email, social media. So let's get started.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. This is my first podcast, so I'm going to try not to
right.
mess this up too bad. But
hey, it's okay.
So I'm a retired military officer, and so I had to kind of figure out what I was going to do with the second part of my adult life. I wanted to get into art and be a comic book artist because that's what I loved growing up was comic books. I wanted to kind of re-experience that sensation of being a young kid wanting to grow up and be a comic book artist. Sure. So a lot of my art's influenced by what I was passionate about when I was 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And that just happened to be kind of a golden age of this barbaric invasion that we're talking about into America, that, with the Conan, Thundarrs, the Beastmasters, Warlord, so on and so forth. So I kind of got back into that, and that's where I am today.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, we picked out 3 that I think you guys will like and you can probably relate to. And like you said, we're going to start with Conan, which is probably one of the bigger, more common in pop culture, is Robert E Howards Conan stories. One of the probably guiding, at least what I found on the internet when I was researching this, is the start of the Barbarian Invasion, for lack of a better term, was Frank Frazetta's artwork. And I will put some links in the show notes and some pictures of his artwork. And I guarantee you most of you out there, most of you will know exactly who we're talking about when you see some of these iconic covers. We've got one here of the muscular barbarian Conan standing on basically a pile of bodies and his sword in his hand, which was pretty much encapsulates the whole story of Conan. And so if you check him out, it's Frank Frazetta, his artwork, excellent. He won a bunch of awards, Eisner Awards, for some of his comic book art, and he was in the Comic Book Hall of Fame in 95, and then the Jack Kirby Hall of Fame in 99, and many, many others. But he not only did Conan art, he did a lot of other fantasy art, but I think he's probably most well known for his Conan art.
Yeah, Frazetta is, by and large, he's kind of like the godfather or the king of that sword and sorcery fantasy art that kind of, I think, brought barbarians back, because Conan was kind of a property of the 20s and 30s, if I recall. Yes. And then, like we were discussing earlier, like Frazetta may have been kind of influence that brought that back. And then, Marvel launched the comic book, which, then brought the movies and then brought this whole plethora of barbaric pop culture in the late 70s, early 80s.
And that's kind of his style, extremely detailed and just almost over the top. The muscles are over the top. The axes are being swung clear back. And
right.
There's even an article I read in the AMRA fanzine that they did way back in the 30s and 40s for Robert E. Howard. And they talk about the best weapon they could use back in that time, and it came to the conclusion that the sword was the best. And he goes into all the details. But anyway, Frazetta really just exaggerates. The barbarians have these giant beards, and it's just fascinating.
Right.
But,
when you said earlier, like one of the pieces we're looking at now is Conan standing atop this pile of bodies, and just talk about exaggeration. Like, how much killing would you have to do in one spot to literally pile bodies on top of each other? I mean, like, who keeps coming?
And one guy did it.
Yeah, like, when you see a guy standing on, a forming pile of bodies, why would you leave that guy alone?
I'll admit it, I'm chicken. I would have run. I'm like, he's standing on a pile of bodies. I'm done. I'm out of here. We'll
exactly.
just figure it. We'll find some other way.
Yeah.
That castle isn't worth it.
Exactly.
But yeah, you talked about the 30s. So for those of you that don't know, the Phoenix and the Sword appeared in Weird Tales in December of 1932. So that was Robert E. Howard's first published Conan story, and it was an 8,000-word essay detailing the Hyborian Age. That was his setting. But probably the big one was the Tower and the Elephant. And that was, I think, the first story I ever read. And what's fascinating about that, when I read it, I thought, okay, this takes place in a pre-modern era after the sinking of Atlantis, but before the modern age. But the Tower of the Elephant talks about, spoiler alert, the elephant, so to speak, is an alien from another planet, from a far-flung galaxy, and had been on Earth for thousands and thousands of years. So he just sets up this whole vast world to play in, that Conan can play in. And I thought I was like, wow. There's this whole universe that Robert Howard's created, and this alien has been there for a long time, and it's...
Yeah, I totally forgot that the Tower of the Elephant, that elephant creature in the end was alien.
They found him in a, I think it was in a jungle in Kitsa, that's how you pronounce the country. But anyway,
yeah.
There was multiple of them, but he was the last one left.
Okay, yeah. When you say that, it just really surprises me because I forgot about the sci-fi undertones that were in what is classically known as like a sword and sorcery genre that, Robert E. Howard kind of almost defined. He's one of those pioneers in that genre in the 30s.
Oh, yeah, definitely. He had a lot of influence from, when I was reading about him, H.P. Lovecraft and him, I guess, would exchange letters. And
yeah. Makes total sense with the alien-shaped, elephant-shaped alien. Yeah. That's Lovecraftian.
That whole concept was just fascinating. In his other book, he wrote, it takes place in Roman times. I forgot the name of it now. He meets these snake people, and the snake people are in Conan's stories as well, but they talk about the snake people being there long before humans, and there was this whole intergalactic time frame where there's spaceships going to and from Earth. So this would have taken place before Atlantis.
Okay.
Way, way back. But he talks about spaceships, and then their whole race died out, and then the Atlanteans showed up, and then you get to Conan's time. But again, it stretched back even further. So
sure.
He's exploring that whole, this is a lot older than we think concept.
I don't know if I'm thinking of the same timeline you're talking, but I know Robert E. Howard had a character named Cole.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, okay. There's Cole,
right.
And he was Atlantean time, right. But this one was the last of the snake people had infiltrated England during the Roman times.
Okay.
And Cormac.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
There we go. Cormac MacArthur, I think is how you pronounce
it.
There we go. Yeah, Cormac. Anyway, it talks about him, and he had talked to the snake people, and they give him this whole backstory. And again, that was just, wow, I was just impressed with that.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the Cormac, but I do remember the Cole, and I was always fascinated that Robert E. Howard had this whole mythology in his head that like transcended like multiple like eons, basically, where Cole's people in Atlantis were kind of like wiped out, and then like somehow they resurfaced. And in Conan's world, I think they were the Picts, which were like a different breed of barbarians that lived like west of where Conan grew up or something.
So they live on that west coast, and actually I think Conan is a direct descendant of Cole's.
Yeah,
he's Atlantean.
Right.
And they settled in the north.
Right. And I think there's even like, I remember some references in some of I don't know if it was in actually Robert E. Howard's writings, maybe it was in the comic books, where there was like some Atlantean artifacts that had still like resurfaced in Conan's time, and it was kind of like this homage back to the Cole stories, and it was just very well tied together.
They had a story later. I don't know if Robert Howard, he didn't write it directly, but it was L. Sprague de Camp did Conan of the Isles. Okay. And he went, it was his later years after he'd become king, and he was kind of getting tired of palace life and wanted another kind of a final adventure.
Midlife crisis for a barbarian.
There you go.
King,
Instead of buying a Camaro and chasing teen girls, he hops on a ship and heads out in the ocean.
Right.
So
whatever mid-age barbarian does, right?
There, why not? So anyway, he hops on a ship, heads out west, bumps into this island that it's left over from Atlantis, and there's some people still there. I don't know if L. Sprague de Camp, got some of that information from maybe an outline, because a lot of the stories, if you look into it, he didn't. I think he only completed 22 stories that are from beginning to end.
Yeah, Robert E. Howard, like he, unfortunately, like committed suicide early, and
he was 33.
Yeah, he only had a handful of short stories written for that Weird Tales, and then I think he had maybe one or two full-length novels, maybe just one, and then a lot of unfinished drafts that other authors took up the torch on.
Yeah, Elsbreg de Camp and several others took up. He may have written, half a page, 1,000 words or less, and they just kind of... Anyway, he went to that island and found these Atlanteans that were left over, feeded them, and then went even further west, sail off into the sunset, so to speak.
Yeah, the typical American cowboy one. I will not be tamed. I will retain my freedom forever.
Well, the funny thing is, at the end, it was kind of interesting. They said, Conan mentions there's rumors of this other land farther west.
Oh, the
and
New World.
If you know the geography of Conan's Hyborian Age, it's all Africa, Asia, Middle East all put together, but he's talking about North America, so he kind of slips that in.
Yeah, it's like that, what's that scientific term where there was like those supercontinents before they all split?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if that was like back in the science in Robert E. Howard's day, but he totally called it. It's like a supercontinent of like Asia, Africa, and Europe all smashed together.
Yeah, they even, I think it was Elsbreg de Camp or somebody came up with a kind of a post-history several hundred years after Conan had died and what happened. The Picts ended up taking over pretty much kind of like a Roman invasion, because the Picts were considered the barbaric people of that time. How the Picts just overran the whole area and put everything into chaos, and then there was a massive earthquake, and then Samaria became Scotland and Ireland, and then Africa split off, and kind of how everything then became the modern map that we would look at.
Continental split and a dark ages and a reemergence of the land we know it as it is today, right? Yeah, that's just brilliant. The books, I actually did not even read the full books and short stories until I was probably well into my teens, maybe in the college years, but the one that stands out most to me is The Hour of the Dragon, which I believe is the only full-length novel that Robert E. Howard written. Where Conan's already a king and he's well established, and he's in those shenanigans of these sorcerers trying to usurp his. He has to lay down the barbaric law only as he knows how.
Lop off some heads.
Right, solve every problem with a battle axe. Gotta love it. But I do remember Hour of the Dragon being phenomenal. But mostly Conan's influence on me as a younger kid was the Marvel comic books. I mean, at one time they must have had 3 or 4 comics, and some of them were adaptations of Robert E. Howard's stories to adapt into comic form, and some of them were just the imaginings of their writers, and Roy Thomas probably being the biggest one. But yeah, those were the earliest like great Conan stories for me, and then the novels were just icing on the cake as I grew up and got deeper into the lore and into everything.
Yeah, I agree. I have the novels that came out, I think it was in the 60s, where they put them all together and tried to put them in sequential story order.
Oh, the Robert E. Howard original stories.
Yeah, and a lot of them were finished by Elsbreg de Camp.
Sure.
So I guess the true purist out there, if you're a purist Conan, they have a book out there that has just Robert E. Howard's stories, finished or unfinished, and they put them all together in like it's 400 some pages.
I think that's the one I have, because I remember some of them I popped open reading it, and there would literally just be like a 400-page outline or just the beginning of a story, and then that would cut off. Sure. And then I remember reading some of those, and I'm like, oh, this reminds me of Conan issue like 181 or something. I'd look back at them, like, sure enough, they fully adapted this tidbit into a full length.
Let's move into the comics, I guess. Marvel did it first.
Yep.
In the 70s and then 80s.
Yep.
And then I think Dark Horse got a hold of the property.
Yeah, Dark Horse picked it up, I want to say, in the early 2000s maybe. And their run just ended not too long ago, maybe here in the last few months, when Marvel reacquired the rights. And actually, I just saw on the internet not too long ago that Marvel's first new Conan comic since like the 80s is going to be in January of 2019. So I'm pretty stoked to see that coming back.
Yeah, we'll see how they do. I remember I have a few of the 80s comics that Marvel put out, and then I have some of the Dark Horse ones too, and I thought the 80s ones was kind of, maybe you can, since you read them more, they were some of the comics, in my opinion, kind of hit and miss.
Sure.
And I remember one, I thought it was kind of funny, they didn't draw what Conan was seeing, so what they did is did a word bubble or thought bubble of Conan describing what he was seeing.
Interesting.
Instead of drawing it, and I thought that's kind of weird, but I'm guessing maybe what they couldn't either draw it or they couldn't fit it in the panel, or or something like that. I
That's
thought it was kind
interesting.
of interesting.
I don't think I've seen that one, but that's
Yeah, I'll have to find it. It was kind of funny, but yeah, I thought they did a good job. It's that classic 80s art style, in my opinion, which is just really interesting and very detailed, all done by hand.
Right.
No computers.
Right. I think the guy you're probably talking about, like John Buscema, he's like my favorite Conan artist from like the 70s and 80s. Just to me, like just defined what Conan looked like in the comic book. But yeah, you're right. Like Marvel, I think at their height had 4 or 5 Conan titles like simultaneously. They had like King Conan, Normal Conan. There was like a Savage Sword of Conan magazine. There was like a Conan Saga magazine. And like you said, there was so much Conan stuff coming out. There was some poor quality stuff. I'm not going to argue, but
I'm sure. Yeah. When you have that many,
and I think you got to give some credit to Marvel though, because I think they kind of brought that, maybe off the popularity of Frazetta's work, but Conan had kind of maybe fallen away in popular culture after Robert E Howard's run in the 30s, other than some of those pulp novels you talked about in the 50s and 60s or whatnot. But then once Marvel showed how popular it could be in the comic books, then we got this like landfall, landslide of barbarians, from Thundarr and Beastmaster and the Conan movies and so on and so forth. It just went on, and you even see like DC trying to keep up. They released the Warlord and Claw.
Yeah.
And there's all these other titles they were trying to get on the coattails of this popularity that was happening at the time.
Well, let's talk about the movie. We've got the Conan the Barbarian movie, of course. Arnold Schwarzenegger was starring in it. And when did you first see it?
I want to say it wasn't in theaters. We watched it on the VHS back when you had to rent VHSs, and you had to rent the VCR along with it, and you had to rewind it, or you get like a penalty if you get charged.
Be kind, rewind.
Exactly. So I do remember watching that at home, and you couldn't have cast a better guy than Arnold Schwarzenegger to play Conan the Barbarian. But what struck me that film when I was watching that as a kid is I don't think, other than there's that preamble and like the prologue, it goes like for 20 or 30 minutes without any dialogue. It's just like action and gesture, and it was all like, but you understood exactly what was going on. And
it's very visual,
and it was like just awesome how they could communicate this powerful message without having Arnold Schwarzenegger just like glub all these lines in this thick
because he at that time he knew very little English,
right?
And so I think that was a perfect casting for him. Do you think it fit Robert E. Howard's Conan somewhat?
I don't. It did not follow Robert E. Howard's Conan to my knowledge, because in the books, like Conan like stayed with his people and like he battled the Aquilonians at like the Battle of Venarium, and then he at some point in his young like 16, 18 years old, he decides to make his way out into the world and becomes like a thief and a reaver and an adventurer and then a general and eventually a king. Well, in the movie, like he's as like a youth, he's like captured by these slavers, and he's like, he has to like grind the salt at this wheel of woe or whatever. And that's, apparently you can get like these like perfect like bodybuilder muscles just by pushing a wheel around in a circle for 20 minutes. Totally weird. Yeah. Who thought you could do that, But and then he, becomes a gladiator. Anyway, in the movie, after he becomes a slave, he becomes a gladiator, and that's how he learns to fight. And then he eventually, gets his freedom. So the origin story is totally different, but I think the theme of the character is the same. And I think they did a good job of capturing that essence of what that barbaric character is.
Yeah, I think he lets his sword talk.
Exactly.
So I think the overall theme that kind of fits it. I watched it, exactly, on VHS, and just like, wow, this is really different.
Yeah. Oh, and James Earl Jones as
the
wizard. Oh, my goodness.
You couldn't have cast that better.
That voice and those crazy eyes when he turns into a snake.
The snake. Yeah, it was just
perfect.
Bizarre. And then, of course, there's Conan the Destroyer that came out so Conan the Barbarian was in 82. Conan the Destroyer was in 84. I thought and like most people, the 84 one was, okay.
It doesn't have the magic that the first one had.
Yeah. Well, and then when I was researching, they had a third script ready for him. He didn't want to do the movie.
Right.
And so that ended up being transferred and morphed into Cole the Conqueror. They did a movie in the 90s.
Right.
And that was they took that script and kind of morphed it into Cole the Conqueror.
Right, and we were actually talking before the show that there was kind of like almost a second resurgence of like barbarian popularity in the 90s with like the Hercules and the Xena. And then obviously, Kevin Sorbo of Hercules fame caught on, and he got to play Cole in the rejected Conan script.
Yeah, exactly. He got the Arnold Schwarzenegger leftovers.
He did.
There was, like you said, in '92 there was a cartoon, Conan the Adventurer.
Right.
And Conan and the Young Warriors was in '94, and that was produced on CBS.
Right.
And then Conan the Adventurer, the live action, was in '97. So yeah, definitely, even though Conan, the movies had come and gone, and definitely by the late '80s, the comic books that Marvel were doing had kind of run its course.
Sure, yeah, they were done.
But you still had this resurgence on TV of Conan and others, like you said, Hercules, and we had a Red Sonja movie in there too, which Arnold Schwarzenegger was in as well.
Yeah, not as Conan though, which was really weird. It always, watching that show screwed me up. I'm like, this is Arnold, this is Red Sonja. Why is he not Conan? I'm sure it was some copyright or something. They didn't have the rights to it, but it was so unsettling.
Which I'm surprised he did, because he was trying to get out of that.
Right.
Typecasted, but
sure.
I wish there is talk of, in February of 2018, there is reported that a Conan TV series is in the works for
Really?
Amazon Prime.
That would be sweet.
They're talking about it. And then, of course, they're talking about bringing Arnold back for a Conan movie that'll take place, like in the books, long after he become king. And
right.
He's much older.
He's
now.
about to run off to the islands and
maybe
into the
run off
sunset.
Islands, I'm wondering, in that story, or in one of the later stories, his son is with him on some of his adventures, so maybe...
Oh, that's right. I do remember he did have a son in some of the Conan the King comic books.
Yeah.
He was a featured character in some of those. I forgot about that.
Yeah. In the books I have more experience with the books, as a story that he goes way south and runs into some leftover serpent men, and they kind of go back in the history of that.
Okay.
Defeat one of his wizards that had been antagonizing him for years and whatnot. So it's the sword and sorcery that we love. So, but yeah, so there's Conan. Any other last thoughts on that? I know they've had some games. They've had video games, RPG games. Okay, yeah. So the Marvel comics, you talked about Conan the Barbarian.
Mm-hmm.
Ran from 70 to 93. I didn't know it went quite that long.
Longer than I thought.
Savage Sword of Conan went from 74 to 95.
Okay.
And then Dark Horse launched their series in 2003.
Yeah, those were some bleak days from 95 to was it 2003?
2003. So they had about 8 years of nothing.
Of no Conan comics.
At all.
And those were some dark days in my life.
But yeah, I thought the Dark... I have a few of the Dark Horse ones too. I think they did a good job of translating.
Right.
And I think the artwork... Well, the Marvel artwork's good, but I thought the Dark Horse got a little bit better. They both have their nostalgic.
Right. I think the Dark Horse, the artist, because they had a parade of artists that they were always replacing about every 10, 12, 20 episodes, but some of them were really great, and some of them, it wasn't really my style.
Yeah.
All right, I'll just put it's not my style.
On the Marvel side.
Yeah. And what I thought interesting about the Dark Horse run, unlike Marvel, Dark Horse actually tried to put like Conan's life in sequence. So like they put all those Howard short stories and novels in order, and then the scholars say that they're in, and then they tried to fill in the gaps between them with their own individually created adventures, and you can kind of see how the life of Conan went from youth up until where they ended their run. Where
I remember that
he wasn't a king yet, but they did a separate run as him as the Conan the King, but. The Marvel comics from the 70s and 80s didn't even try to keep it in order. It was just like this random adventures, which is kind of how actually Howard released his short stories, if I recall. They jump back and forth. Like the first one, he was a king. The next one, he was a young thief, and back and forth. And he left kind of the scholars to piece them together and say, how does this all fit into the life of this barbarian?
It's kind of whatever was scratching that itch at the moment for him.
Right.
Let's look at Conan being a pirate, and he's in his 30s. And then, the elephant in the tower took place when he was probably 19 or something like that. And,
right.
And there's no rhyme or reason.
Right. Well, you jogged my memory on like an interesting Robert E. Howard quote, and I'm going to butcher it, so I apologize to any Robert E. Howard fans out there. But when he was initially writing Conan, he has this great quote about how he was struggling to write this story, and suddenly like Conan appeared to him in the room and just like, write this, you know, and he was the character was so real for him. It was basically there for him. And
Very vivid imagination.
Right. And then the stories just happened. And obviously wherever inspiration took him, like you said, he would just write about it.
They have a movie out there about his life. I don't know if you've watched it, but
I haven't. I need to watch that though. But
and it talks about how he kind of, when he gets into his world, he gets into his world.
Sure.
That's, you know, he's immersed in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably what all creators, I think, especially of that caliber, that's probably how they get into it.
You'd
it's
have
not
to.
just I'm dabbling. It's like I'm getting into his brain.
Yeah, he went neck deep into it. That's for sure.
He didn't mess around. But it's just amazing how a guy from Texas comes up with all this stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And just how vivid he is on his descriptions. So, yeah. So that's our. Let's jump this back to. I was going to mention on the movie. The iconic intro to Conan the Barbarian with Basil doing the intro.
Oh, yeah, the music.
In the days when the oceans drank Atlantis.
Yeah.
That is iconic.
Oh, the whole soundtrack, not just to Conan the Barbarian and also Conan the Destroyer, even though it has issues as a movie, the soundtrack to both of those is phenomenal. The music is just really sets the tone. Well, I guess, like I said earlier, when you have limited dialogue, like the music becomes like an integral part of telling that story, and it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, I forgot to mention the music. But yeah, the intro, Basil, I don't remember his last name, but
Polydorus,
yeah.
I'm butchering it. But
he does one of in Samurai Jack, there's a cartoon called Samurai Jack, and he does the voice for the villain in that. And
oh, really? Yeah. I didn't realize the
Back
guy who
in
did
the
the
early
music was
2000s.
also a voice actor, huh?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's the same voice, you can tell.
Okay.
If you go look up Samurai Jack and the Aku is the villain.
Yeah, I
you
remember
can tell.
Aku.
You can tell it's his voice.
Oh, okay. I think we're confusing two guys because I'm talking about the guy who scored the music.
Oh,
and you're
okay.
talking about the voiceover guy who did like the like
that intro.
Before the seas drank Atlantis, he tread the jeweled thrones under his sandaled feet. Yeah. Okay, I know what you're talking about.
I thought it was Basil, but I might be wrong on the name.
Yeah, I don't know that. I thought was his name just Mako. Like
Maybe
he was like
so.
Prince or Madonna. I thought like that actor.
Oh,
I think his
okay.
name was just Mako, but I could be wrong.
It could be. Okay. Yeah, it might be. So we'll have to look that up.
Yeah.
But then we got another barbarian that we'll move into next, which is Thundarr the Barbarian, the Saturday morning cartoon that was released in October of 1980 and went all the way to October of 1981 on ABC. I watched it when it reran on NBC in 1983.
Okay.
And it was done by Ruby Spears Production. Obviously, you can tell it's I wouldn't say knockoff, but a clone of Conan the Barbarian and kind of a Flash Gordon type mix. That one, again, of course, as a kid, you always got up at Saturday at 6, 7 o'clock or whatever you wanted to get up.
Exactly.
You grabbed your bowl of cereal and sugar-coated cereal, of course,
yep.
that your mom didn't want you to eat, but she was probably still in bed. But you pop in front of the TV and watch your 2 or 3 channels that actually came in on your antenna.
Oh yeah, that was a big to-do on those Saturday mornings. Yeah. It was like that was the one day a week you got like a steady stream of cartoons, other than the 1 or 2 after school if you were lucky enough to get home in time.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, Saturday morning was the time, and Thundarr the Barbarian was the one when it came on. You're like, oh my gosh, this guy has a sword.
Right.
It's like a lightsaber. It's energy.
He was so different than any other cartoon at that time that I recall.
Oh yeah,
and
the villains. Yeah, he was hacking stuff, throwing stuff, and reason I remember is they used to. I don't know if you remember this, but on Friday nights before they started the cartoon season, they would do a little 30-minute kind of preview of all the cartoons that are coming out.
I remember that.
Yeah, and he was on one of those, and I remember seeing that. I'm like, oh my gosh, and I don't know. My mom was probably like, you can't watch that.
Yeah, that is taboo.
Yeah.
No, yeah. Thundarr was, I remember it as well. When he first came on, he was just so visually striking and different than anything else on Saturday morning. Not only in just the level of, like, I don't know if you want to call it violence or just adult themes that was involved with it, but, Jack Kirby, which obviously an icon of comic art, was involved in the art, and his style just like came through so strong in that series, and it just couldn't be denied. And yeah, so Thundarr, clearly riding the coattails of Conan's popularity at the time. And then I think what's interesting, like you said, it was kind of a mix of Flash Gordon. To me, it was almost more of a mix of Star Wars.
Okay.
Like, Star Wars obviously hugely popular at this time. And I think these guys at Ruby Spears Productions were like, how can we meld these, maybe two popular, genres together, is sword and sorcery and this sci-fi blitz that's going on right now. And then, voila, you've got Thundarr with his sun sword, a.k.a. lightsaber. And Ukla, a.k.a. Chewbacca. Yeah, it's just, there's exactly so many parallels.
And then you got Princess Leia.
Yeah, Ariel.
Ariel, who is the kind of the Princess Leia.
Yeah, exactly. And
tough woman. And they touched on all. So I guess to back up a little bit, Thundarr the Barbarian takes place in a futuristic Earth where Earth has been destroyed or damaged dramatically. And side note, they thought about doing, the creators doing a post-nuclear world.
Oh, really?
But they didn't want to scare the kids.
Oh, so they did.
That was obviously in the 80s. That was a big scare. The Cold War was going on, and it's something that could happen.
So hence the comet.
Yes, so that's where they came up with the comet. Well, this is a little more unlikely, so let's just throw that. So comet comes by Earth, causes the moon to split in half, and takes off some of the atmosphere of the Earth, which lets more radiation in. And so now, it was in the year 1994, so obviously it didn't happen. So we're fast forward 2,000 years, you're in the year 3,994, and the Earth has been transformed, and they have lots of pieces in the background of the Golden Gate Bridge and Beverly Hills and New York, as you can see the skyline of the dilapidated skyline.
Right.
Wizards have kind of taken over a little bit, so it's a mix of different creatures have been irradiated. So now you have these whales that can shoot fire, and you have these other creatures like his companion Ukla that looks kind of like Chewbacca, and then you have these wizards combined with technology.
Right. You jogged my memory on the whole. It was 2,000 years after the apocalypse that Thundarr kind of had his rise, and there was all these leftovers from current day. And you can understand like the Golden Gate Bridge, maybe remnants of it still standing, or like the Statue of Liberty, which I remember was like in the first episode, like a wizard brought the Statue of Liberty to life. Yes. But there was always these hilarious things that like no way would last 2,000 years. I remember like there would be some characters wearing like clothes, like from our age, like, like a sea captain's hat, like, because he was on a boat or something. I'm like, all right, really? Did this fabric last 2,000 years?
Yeah, I remember reading about that. They're like, there's no way some of this stuff would last.
There was an episode, I think, where they were like, they hot-wired a dune buggy that was 2,000 years old. Oh, my gosh. It's like, really?
It's like, you're not... what are the odds?
Yeah, these tires are still around. This rubber lasted 2,000 years.
Yeah, you can't even get a tire to last 2 years, let alone
exactly.
2,000. That's a good point. So, yeah, we had the three characters. So you had they took those three. You have the Princess Ariel, who's kind of the brains of the bunch, so to speak. Then you have the Thundarr that's, I'm just going to get in the fight and do what you want, do what I can to take out this guy. And then, of course, you have Ukla, who is kind of the humanoid figure, but he's buds with buds with Thundarr.
Yeah, he's that Chewbacca, that furry superhuman
sidekick. Yeah. And they were, I think the backstory a little bit on him is they were slaves. Thundarr helped start a slave revolt, and Ukla was a slave with him, and Princess Ariel came along with him to take out the guy that enslaved them as well.
Yeah, and interesting you bring that up, jogs my memory. It also ties to the Conan, where you were talking about there was that iconic prologue in Conan where it's like, before the seas drank Atlantis and the rise of whatever. The Thundarr backstory was never addressed in any of the issues. It was just this iconic title sequence that they did, that they showed him like getting free and befriending his friends, and like you never get to see the origin story other than this like 20-second intro. Title intro.
Yeah. All of a sudden, the comet comes and
that's all you need to know.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah,
character fully developed. On to the episodes.
But that's what I think was so simplistic and so fun about the show.
Right.
It's like we don't need a backstory.
Right. You just need a guy with a sun sword.
He's got a sword. He's going to chop some people up, and like we were talking about, this is different than He-Man. He-Man would just throw a rock at somebody and get them stuck in a cave, or punch something and a tree would fall down. But no, he used his sword. There was very rarely robots. He didn't mess around. If somebody fell out of something, you didn't see if they actually got back up.
Yeah, just like you said, the He-Man. Like you even talking about He-Man throwing a rock. Like he wouldn't even hit him with the rock. He would use the rock to like block them, or to hit the log that they were standing on, which would knock them over into the pile of mud. It was very like tame. Where in the Thundarr comic or cartoon, you've got Ukla, I remember he was famous for this, like picking up like just these random objects and like giving people the smackdown.
Yeah.
Like he'd pick up like a VW bug or like rip a telephone pole out of the ground, and he was just
And he'd hit them with them.
he would just wade through them.
Yeah, he wouldn't just throw it in front of them so they'd trip. He would hit them with it.
Exactly.
And they would fall, and sometimes you didn't know if, I don't know if they fell off a cliff but it was.
Yeah, I mean, there was no blood. I don't think they'd allow that, but it was still, the violence was very accelerated for its time in the 80s and what they got away with for a Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah, it was, and that's one of the reasons even the creators say that's one of the reasons it got canceled.
Yeah.
Is they're like, we're getting too many complaints from parents and kids, but kids are loving it. We're sitting there going, yeah!
Exactly. Yeah, I can't imagine how, I know there's millions of kids out there that probably weren't allowed to watch it. And my heart goes out to you if you missed Thundarr in the early 80s.
Well, for those of you out there that want to watch it, it still is available on DVD. You can go to Amazon, and I'll put a link in the show notes. You can go check it out, and you can still buy it and enjoy it. But one of the bad guys, the villains on there, is Gemini. And when I was researching him, he was the only foe to appear twice in the comic book.
Really?
And he's the guy that he has two heads. And so he kind of rotates. So he's kind of like Man-E-Faces, talking about He-Man, but he has two heads. So his head would just rotate to the left and go behind him, and this little metal cap or whatever would go over the back, and he'd have two faces. Mm-hmm. And if you look at him, so look him up, Thundarr the Barbarian, Gemini, and you'll find a picture of him. And you can tell his face looks a lot like Darkseid. Oh, which is the same creation that Jack Kirby made.
You can totally see it.
We've got it here, but if you go look it up, you can see his face is a lot like Darkseid.
Yeah, I never put that two and two together, but oh my gosh, he's like he's almost the spitting image of Darkseid, and he was a precursor to Man-E-Faces. Now that I think about it, because He-Man didn't come out for a couple of years, and I'm trying to remember back to the cartoon when he switched faces. Was one like kind of his like, I'm kind of trying to trick you. I'm trying to play the good guy, and then game's over. I'm gonna blast you with my laser eyes now. And
yeah, I need to. I would have to rewatch it, but I only remember the red eyes because he could shoot again energy out of his eyes, again just like Darkseid. And I don't know. That's a good question. I'll have
was
to
it
look
just
it
a
up.
Gimmick, or did it actually have a part of the story? I got to go back and look at it again. I have to watch that episode.
Yeah, I don't know, but he was the only villain that appeared twice, which I thought was neat.
Well, yeah. I mean, they only had 2 seasons. I'm not even sure if they finished the second season before they went off the air.
They didn't have 2 seasons. They had just the one, I think.
Was it just one? Okay. Yes, they didn't have.
Because it went from October to October, so they usually did most of those in 22 episodes.
Okay.
So I would imagine it just had the one.
They may not have had a whole lot of time to bring back recurring villains.
Yeah, exactly. Because typically they just did, and like you said, these are just set stories with not a lot of background. Like bringing the Statue of Liberty to life. That was his. He had to use the Pearl to. Sorry, spoilers. He uses the Pearl to stop the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
And I remember they're hacking away at the Statue of Liberty. This thing's made of metal. What are we gonna do?
Right. Ukla threw like a VW bug at him.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, if you watch the intro, he throws a VW bug, and I think it's kind of funny. He probably does that in every episode.
Yeah, probably.
We're just gonna throw a VW bug. But yeah, it's still available on DVD. They did have toys. They had a toy line by Toonami, and it came out in 2003. So it came out a lot later.
Yeah, because I don't remember the Thundarr toy at all as a kid. And I actually distinctly remember when He-Man came out, I was like, oh my gosh, it's Thundarr. And then like, well, wait a minute, it's not quite Thundarr.
Not quite Thundarr.
Still cool, but
still awesome.
Yeah, at the time, because that was my frame of reference, because Thundarr came a couple of years before Masters of the Universe. But I did not know they made a toy in the 2000s.
Yeah, they only had the 3 main characters, I guess. Okay. And you can look it up. It's by Toonami, and it came out in 2003.
Obviously for collectors and not for kids.
Yeah,
if you're making a property 20 years later.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about it. I think this is a property. They're rebooting everything. If they're doing She-Ra. There's maybe a He-Man movie, which is still on the knife's edge of whether or not it's going to happen or not. Hopefully it does. But
right.
I think this would be a property that would be great. Thundercats are doing that.
Yep, that got Voltron got rebooted not too long ago, but I think Warner Brothers owns the right to this now, and they own DC if I'm not mistaken, or there's something in cahoots with each other. So come on DC, if you're listening to this, you got a great property sitting on your shelf, just waiting to be dusted off.
Exactly. Look at Motu. They got huge following of fans from that are our ages in their 40s and even
Right.
50s, but they did the reboot back in early 2000s, and I think they captured some younger fans there.
Right.
But
Well, DC just relaunched a bunch of those Hanna-Barbera characters in there. There's, I want to say, like Johnny Quest and Scooby-Doo, and some of the Herculoids came back out, I think. And come on, give me some Thundarr.
They're even doing crossovers. They did I read a Jabberjaw and Aquaman crossover comic. It's kind of a one-issue, one-shot. They've done, I think, Daffy Duck and the Joker.
Really?
They're just doing, you can go look it up, but they've done some of these weird things. So I think Thundarr, they're even doing one with the Injustice League, so they're doing Superman versus He-Man.
I did see that on the shelves. I was down at the Trade Tape not too long ago. I saw that sitting on the shelves, and I almost picked it up.
I think doing a Thundarr comic book, maybe even just a limited series, doing a 12-issue limited series or 6 or something.
Right. Just don't cross him over with Daffy Duck.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, that would be, DC, the powers that be. Thundarr's waiting to happen. Just, I will buy it.
Yeah. I think it would go over well, even if they either as a comic book or even a reboot anime.
Sure.
Genre would be fun. So, well, any other last comments on Thundarr?
No, the Thundarr was great. I wish he would come back. I don't have any other comments, but it just we continue to stroll through the Barbarian Invasion here and what other characters that were around at that time.
So the last one we want to look at is the Warlord. So you brought it up to my attention. I had never really, or at least I don't recall, seeing this comic book. But again, it has the barbarian flavor to it. So why don't you do a quick, let the listener know what the Warlord is.
Sure. So the Warlord was a DC comic, and I'd have to look at the timelines. It may have been an answer to the Conan popularity, or it may have been kind of running simultaneously to it. But
came out in 75.
Okay, and so pretty simultaneous then, because I think we talked earlier, Conan was about that same time that Marvel started pumping out the Conan. So maybe not an answer, but kind of running parallel to it. So what you had was Travis Morgan. He's an Air Force pilot back in the Cold War, and he accidentally gets shot down over the polar ice caps. Instead of crashing into the polar ice caps, he goes through basically this hole in the Earth's crust, and he ends up inside this Earth inside the Earth, this realm called Skartaris. He becomes like almost this reverse barbarian or anti-barbarian. I don't know what you want to call it, but he's a civilized man. Obviously, a fighter. He's an Air Force guy, but he finds himself in a land of savagery, of swords and sorcery and dinosaurs and all sorts of creatures, and he reverts to being a barbarian. And actually, throughout the series, he becomes more barbaric than the land itself. And that's one of the recurring themes in it, is this. He has several opportunities to come back to the civilized land and reacquaint with his family, and he keeps nope, this is who I am. I am living the dream of being this free barbarian and all the dangers that come with it. And that's where Travis Morgan stays and becomes the Warlord of Skartaris.
Yeah, and when I was researching it, Skartaris the name comes from a mountain peak that was in the Earth's core in the story Journey to the Center of the Earth, which obviously this has a lot of parallels.
Right.
So. Now you did some flying in the past. Did you ever find a hole in the Earth?
No, I never had the pleasure of flying over the polar ice caps, but also never had the pleasure of being shot down by Russians. So
good point.
I'm calling it squaresy.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, it was a really interesting story, and if I'll put a link to the cover of it. We were discussing the cover has the Comics Code Authority on it, but then right on the inside page has the Warlord fighting this dinosaur, and there's blood all over his body. As far as I know, the reason they had that was you couldn't do something like that. And it's red blood, which I thought was interesting. They were back in the day, they were pretty picky about showing a lot of blood.
Yeah, I didn't realize that until you brought that up when we were talking earlier, that this still had the American Comic Code, seal of approval, and it was a fairly violent comic book. And looking back at some of these images that you printed out, there's blood, and there's blood on his knife, and even the dinosaurs bleeding. It's a full on knife fight.
Yeah, exactly. It's very he's cocked back, ready to stab, and then even the dialogue, he swears, which again the Comics Code Authority was pretty stringent on that. And so you didn't usually see any swearing, and you didn't see any blood. So I don't know, maybe the rules back in the 70s were different, or this one slid under the radar. And this came out in 75, and just to recap, the Conan comics that Marvel did start in 70. So this was probably
maybe it was a little bit of
DC's answer to Conan.
Yeah.
because they had a lot of that back in the day.
Yeah, I remember Claw was another one that DC tried to answer.
Okay.
They even stole some of the artists away from Marvel
Yeah.
to do some of their art. But
that happened a lot.
yeah. But yeah, getting back to the Warlord, in the comics code, I'm just thinking back now. In addition to the violence, there was some like moral ambiguity in the Warlord's character too, where he wasn't necessarily heroic for like benevolent needs all the time. Sometimes he was heroic just because he like a bloodlust would come upon him, and like he just wanted to wade into the fight. And there would be like other characters that have to like calm him down and
Kind of pull him back.
Right, and he would kind of do some morally flexible things to like in order to like get his like fix basically, which was like he loved the adrenaline of the fight and the living the barbaric life. And even some of his companions, I remember, like he kind of made this. It wasn't like marriage per se, but like this oath to this one queen of the barbarians, this girl named Tara.
Tara, yeah.
Yeah. But yet he always had this female, like, shape-shifting companion named Shakira. Like, she could be a cat or she could be a woman. And they would go on these adventures by themselves. And, like, Tara was always, like, super jealous. And it never, like, showed much physical intimacy. But it was very, like... Implied that there was, like, some hanky-panky going on. The Warlord wasn't necessarily the greatest of guys,
That's interesting that he's not this perfect as... we would prop up the perfect hero. But in a callback to Conan, he was pretty chivalrous. Chivalrous, I'm not saying it right, but a lot of chivalry. But he was kind of the same way. It was kind of his own law.
Right.
But yet, I guess we all found that as a reader maybe appealing.
Right.
But
because Conan he had like a different lady almost every episode,
yeah.
or at least, every couple of episodes. But in his defense, he never really made like any sort of oath or commitment.
No.
To one, like, I mean, Warlord had a child with Tara.
Oh, okay.
And,
okay.
Once Conan, he became king, like, he ended up marrying Zenobia, and he was pretty faithful at that point, as far as I know.
That's
Correct
true.
me if I'm wrong, Robert E. Howard, fanatics. But whereas Travis Morgan and the Warlord, he
didn't care.
Yeah, he came and go as his feelings went, and, it was kind of way more morally flexible than
that was a little different, especially for that time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so if you look at the description, it says the kind of the plug that they have for the Warlord. In the savage world of Skitaris, life is a constant struggle for survival. Here beneath the unblinking orb of eternal sunlight, one simple law prevails. If you let down your guard for an instant, you will soon be very dead. So that's iconic almost of that time of the plugs that they kind of gave.
Yeah, and I'm looking at this, and this is cracking me up. I'm tying two pieces together here. So the picture of Tara we're looking at, she's kind of got like this, for lack of a better term, like fur swimwear on. Yeah. Where, it's got like, it's like a bikini except it's made out of fur, and it's got like some vertical straps. And if you flip back a couple pages to the picture of Thundarr, very similar outfit. Like,
Oh, yeah, you're right.
It's got that vertical fur striped kind of onesie,
Kind of
for lack of a better term.
the fur onesie, kind of like the fur diaper on Masters Universe that they wear. Yeah, yeah.
So I'm almost picturing like this, like a fashion magazine at the time, like who wore it better, and having like a picture of Tara next to a picture of Thundarr. Vote here.
That's awesome. Maybe we'll have to do a poll on that. Who wears it better? That would be awesome.
Well, now that to tie them all together, if you think of Balit's character in the Conan comic books, John Buscema, very similar fur onesie.
Fur onesie, yeah, and which is she's wearing right there.
Right.
Well, yeah, I guess. What is it? The good artist borrow, great artist steal.
Exactly. Great.
So that's might be the case here.
Yeah.
They have one thing. He got a lot of influence, I guess, on this is from Edgar Rice Burroughs' writing that he did, and he did a lot of this. They had the same type of concept.
Oh yeah.
That the inside of the earth was hollow, and it had this whole different savage world in it.
Well, I can see that reflected with, Tarzan's. He was a product of a civilized world that was raised into savagery, kind of like Warlord, except Warlord did it much later than, obviously, Tarzan was kind of an infant when it happened. And then even Edgar Rice Burroughs' John Carter from Mars, same thing. He was a Civil War soldier that ended up being thrust into a very barbaric landscape on Mars, and ended up becoming very part of it and accepting the barbaric nature of it. So I can see a common theme running through that. Yeah, I've read a couple of the I've read Tarzan. I've read the first couple of his John Carter of Mars series, but he's got like I don't know how many dozen of some of those books, and I know those have been made into comics as well. I think Dynamite has the rights to the John Carter, but
they're still doing it.
yeah, it's been running for quite a while.
There's a lot to pull from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, the main antagonist in the Barbarian is Demos. Is how you pronounce it? I'm not sure.
Yeah, Demos or Demios. Yeah.
Kind of the main wizard.
It's a comic book. You pronounce however you want.
Yeah, you're probably right. There is no exact. But he has, again, some Atlantean ties, I guess. He's pulling some of their technology, I guess, from New Atlantis.
Yeah.
Is what he's talking about. They thought it was magic, but it's actually technology that he's using.
Yeah, because when I forgot about that, when Atlantis sunk below the oceans on the surface, it like resurfaced in its own form or fashion down in Skartaris.
Yeah.
And this was pre, Travis Morgan time. So even down there, Atlantis is like a forgotten culture with like there's remnants of technology or magic or laying about still.
Yeah, so I thought that was kind of cool that
Yep.
they pulled again from that, which again, Robert E. Howard, the Atlantis whole thing, and he's kind of pulling that in as well. So I thought that was a good way, and he uses his knowledge, of course, to. He's got a little bit of angst against Travis because I think when he first shows up, he does something to antagonize him, and he's kind of from then on, he's mad. This guy's going to try to take my power.
Yeah, I think he was like not a court magician, but he's kind of like one of an advisor to a king or something like that. And he was kind of weaseling his way into power, this Demios villain. And Travis Morgan kind of came and upset the status quo, and then like he becomes deposed, and he moves out to the fringe of like the polar ice cap where like the Earth curls back on itself, and lives in this world of darkness and plots against Travis Morgan. And it's just bringing back more and more memories because, we're hearkening back to how potentially violent this comic book was for its age. I recall in like the first story arc or maybe the second story arc, Travis Morgan has this child with Tara, and Demios ends up kidnapping the kid and then clones the child. And then he tricks Travis Morgan into basically killing the clone of his own kid, which is like super dark. Yeah. And then not knowing that the real kid is like Demios is hidden him away somewhere else, and the kid grows up to be a character later. But it goes on for a large portion of the Warlord comics where the Warlord's wrestling with this grief because he believes he's killed his own child, So it's just, it gets a little dark.
Yeah, I guess so. I didn't realize that.
I totally forgot.
Wow. Well, I think I did read that Demios had died several times and comes back.
He does.
He lasts through the whole run. I think it was 133 issues, 144 issues it ran. But yeah, I thought it was kind of neat.
Every time he comes back, I remember he gets like more and more messed up, like
somehow his face disfigured.
Right, like some wolf DNA got mixed in. Like he had like wolf ears and claws in one iteration, and then he was like a skeleton in one iteration. It was just he just gets more and more fearsome as it goes.
Well, they did reboot it a couple times. It came back later. I think DC brought it back. I think now they've gone up to 4 times they brought it back. They brought it back, I think, a 12-issue limited series. Yep. But have you read any of the reboots, so to speak?
Yeah, I've collected all the original run. I think I've done all but one of the reboots that they did, and then I'm trying to collect in DC's Convergence storyline, like where they kind of blend a lot of their different multiverses together or whatever. Like I guess he and some of his the Warlord and some of his friends make an appearance, and they're like
pirates or something.
They're lumped in with the Teen Titans, or I can't remember. Okay. So I'm trying to find those ones where those kind of worlds that blended together, but I'm not speaking too knowledgeably on it. I got to find them. But
probably your first love is the original run, though. Yeah.
Right.
So that's what you grew up on, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, he and some of those characters still float around the DC universe. So.
Yeah. And I was reading that if you remember the Justice League Unlimited cartoon that they did back in the early 2000s, they have an episode called Chaos at Earth's Core. Green Lantern and Supergirl and some of the others end up in Skartaris and teamed up with him to stop Demios.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was interesting. They kind of do a throwback.
There was even some of the later comics in the Warlord. I remember there was one annual I recall that it might have been Darkseid that tried to come down and like take over Skartaris, and then like some of like the I don't remember. Some of the good guys came down too, but they weren't like the Justice League. They were somebody else, and I am having a terrible memory. But
no, that's fine. That's fine.
So there was even some crossovers in the original comic
interesting.
as well.
I didn't know that.
Where they fit into the DC universe.
Well, they did come out with some toys. In 1982, they made some action figures called The Lost World of the Warlord, and it was done by Remco.
Yeah.
Travis Morgan was one of the figures, along with Demos, Machist,
yeah.
Mikola, Rostov, and Eric, and Hercules.
Okay. Yeah, and I've actually I remember some of those characters, and actually some of them are advertised in the Warlord comics that I have from my youth. You can see the ads, and it is clear that, was it Remco you said?
Yeah, Remco. Yeah.
They clearly had somebody break into Mattel and steal the molds from He-Man, because they're like this spinning,
really?
like the body of the Warlord is like clearly He-Man's body, and they just put a new rubber head on it.
That's funny.
And if you're ever back down at Behind the Glass at Nate's shop, he has one of them behind the shelf. He has the Warlord toy.
That's awesome.
He tells me he won't sell it to me at any cost. He's keeping that one forever.
That's his.
Yeah, it's still in the case, and it is awesome.
Oh, it's still in the box?
It's still in the box.
Ooh.
And it's phenomenal. And it's clear that Mattel could have sued Remco for some copyright infringement. Maybe.
That's funny. Did you have any of those? Or
no,
not?
I did not have any. Unfortunately, I wish I did. But
yeah, well, for a hefty price,
yeah, I'm sure
you probably can go on eBay and find one.
I am sure I could.
But then your wife would probably kill you.
Yeah.
How much did you pay for this?
Yeah, just a car payment.
Yeah, we'll be all right.
Who needs a car? I have the Warlord.
Yeah, exactly. You could take a payment. Does a bank take payment in Warlord figures?
That's right.
Let's see. Then April 2007, the Warlord became an action figure based upon a modern update in the Series 4 of DC Direct's first appearance figures. So they kind of did a reboot of that. And then in 2010, Warlord became an action figure based on the animated version of the Justice League Unlimited toy line. So based upon that cartoon appearance, they made a figure from that one as well.
He just keeps coming back.
I guess. You just can't keep him down. Like I said, they keep rebooting him. I don't know which reboot they're on, or which version they're up to. But if you are a Goonies fan, you can see in the background in the Warlord issue number 89 is on a deleted scene in a magazine rack at the convenience store on the Goonies DVD.
No kidding.
So if you own the Goonies DVD, go to one of the deleted scenes and you can see an issue number 89 of the Warlord is in the background.
As if the Goonies needed one more reason to be totally awesome, right?
I know. Just one more reason.
One more reason.
In fact, I think if you listen to Daydream Instruction Manual, which is a podcast, Eddie and Jeff and Billy are on there, and Jeff's talking about some of his early memories, and Goonies was one of the influences early in life because he wanted to have a group of friends like the Goonies. He didn't want to be a jock. He wanted to have go on an adventure and have these guys that weren't jocks. They were just kind of nerdy and kind of the misfits and hanging out. So check that out, Daydream Instruction Manual, if you guys want another good podcast to listen to. Any closing thoughts or ideas we've touched on Conan, Thundarr the Barbarian, and now the Warlord.
This was great to have me on. It brought back so many great memories of these barbarians that we grew up with. And, we could probably go on for another hour or two bringing in like the Beastmaster and all these other ones. But I just really appreciate you having me on the show. And I hope I didn't muck it up too bad.
No, hey, you're fine. No, I enjoyed the conversation. It's good to have somebody similar age, similar interest to talk to.
Right.
And you can see Lee's art. We should call it the Lee and Lee Show, maybe. But anyway.
Oh crap! It's Lee and Lee.
And at on your Facebook page, you got a Facebook page.
I do.
Art of Lee Bokma,
yep.
Right? Okay. So go to the Facebook, just search Art of Lee Bokma, and you can find it. You can probably just type in Bokma, and it'll probably show up.
Yep.
But check out his art, and if you're interested, he draws a lot of good retro art of Thundarr the Barbarian, other retro art that you can check out. Also, you might be going to some cons maybe in the future, so that'll be in the plans.
I got a schedule or 3 or 4 coming up this spring, and summer I plan on hitting here in the Omaha, Lincoln, Grand Island area. So I'm looking forward to that. And some of my work's down at the Behind the Glass that we mentioned earlier, and so a lot of it's influenced by these early barbarians and others influences from my childhood. So
next Frank Frazetta.
Well, let's not get crazy.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks.
Well, thanks, Lee.
There you have it, the Barbarian Invasion. Like I said, it was a lot of fun to do this episode. It was great just to sit down and talk with him. So go to covertnerd.net to give me some feedback on the episode. I would really appreciate it. You can email me, cn@covertnerd.net. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. But the easiest way is just to go to covertnerd.net, click on the links there, and you can get in touch with me. So thank you for listening. I appreciate your time. And until next time, nerd it up.